Okay, let's just jump right into this one. Today's explainer covers a really captivating mystery from 1890. It involves a reporter, a high plains prison, and an impossibly tall prisoner who is scheduled to hang. We're going to unravel this quiet, kind of strange corner of history. It's all about a lost notebook and a published article and a confession that, honestly, challenges the very foundation of how our modern world operates. The whole thing kicks off in the spring of 1890 when a reporter walked out of a stone prison on the high plains, only to have his editor immediately kill the story he brought back.
9. That is the reported height in feet of the prisoner that journalist Elias Renner spent 3 days interviewing. Renner sat on this little wooden stool outside a cell that literally had to be specially widened and heightened just so the man could sit upright. He was kept down a corridor that the guards actively avoided walking down, and by every account that's managed to trickle down to us, he was scheduled to hang at the end of the month.
His eyes were the eyes of a man looking at something a great distance behind you. That's a direct quote from Renner. You see, he didn't find the lumbering, slack-faced monster you'd expect from the cheap engravings of the time. Instead, he found this lean, calm man, built long and spare, with hands that were enormous but precise. He spoke in this low-level voice with an unplaceable accent and a deeply lined face. He just sat very still, offering this calm, totally unhurried attention to the reporter.
Now, to fully grasp Renner's world, we've got to remember the 19th century giant phenomenon. Back then, newspapers were frequently reporting on enormous 7 to 9 foot skeletons being unearthed. A farmer's plow would strike something, or a railroad crew grading a hill would suddenly expose these massive bones. And we're not just talking about cheap tabloids here. These reports were in respectable county papers, written in flat, factual language. But here's the catch. There was a very consistent, suspicious pattern. These bones were always gathered up by men from Eastern institutions, crated away, and then vanished. Poof. No physical remains were ever actually retained or cataloged.
So how does a living, 9-foot man actually end up in a territorial penitentiary? Well, the giant was captured, without a fight by the way, near an unmapped, ancient stone structure out in a really remote stretch of country. The surviving accounts definitely linger on this structure. They describe massive fitted blocks, so huge and closely joined that there was absolutely no mortar showing between the seams. A survey crew had been sent out to investigate the spot, and 2 of those men died. When authorities finally came for the giant, he peacefully surrendered. He never even denied the charge of their deaths. He just insisted that he had warned the doomed crew that they were, quote, digging where they shouldn't.
Who built the heavy stone parts at the center of your city? Renner was asking the usual reporter questions, and the giant was mostly just letting them fall into silence. But late in that first afternoon, he turned the tables and asked Renner that exact question, and really it forms the philosophical heart of this entire mystery. He meant the old parts, the structures that were already standing when the towns were young. And man, that question completely opened the floodgates for the second and third days of the interview. Here's the old world versus the new world. This perfectly illustrates the giant's core claim. He actually belonged to an older people who were the original builders. In their old world, these grand buildings weren't just pretty monuments, they were actual machinery. Domes, towers, long halls, they were all part of a system that drew heat and light freely from nature, completely eliminating economic scarcity. But when a catastrophe wiped out this world, the inheritors of the ruins, the new world, they faced a choice. If they let these buildings work as intended, they couldn't get rich. So they deliberately created artificial scarcity. They claimed the buildings were mere ornaments, forcing everyday citizens to endlessly buy coal and electricity just to survive.
Tartaria. It's a modern internet theory proposing an advanced, forgotten civilization whose grand architecture was stolen by a new global order following a catastrophic mud flood. If you've ever fallen down an alternative history rabbit hole, this is going to sound incredibly familiar, right? It maps perfectly. The new global order simply inherited the ruins and quietly rewrote what they meant. The giants in our 1890 story basically just adds living giants into the mix and provides a super clear motive for why history was rewritten, money, and the deliberate creation of an economy of scarcity. The giant even claimed that the grand 19th century World's Fairs were essentially an open trick. Think about those massive, dazzling white cities full of domes and colonnades. He said they built them quickly using the old methods and then deliberately demolished them almost immediately. The goal? A massive psychological trick performed right out in the open. They wanted to prove to the public that grand architecture is totally disposable. Because, as the giant argued, if you show people that their grandest buildings are easily made and quickly destroyed, they're never going to stop to ask who truly built them in the first place.
The true threat to the new economic order is a living witness
who remembers a world without artificial scarcity. That's the absolutely crucial point here. A dead giant whose bones can be shoved into a crate? Not a threat. The dead are quiet. But a living giant? One who can stand in the middle of a city street and plainly state that he remembers when that specific building was warm without coal and bright without wires? That is way too dangerous to exist. You can't just reason a living witness out of the world. You have to remove him. And that, according to the story, is exactly why he was quietly condemned to hang. Okay, let's pause for a second. Before we let this haunting story settle too comfortably, we need to give it a hard, honest look. Let's trace this timeline. It starts in 1869 with the Cardiff giant hoax being uncovered in New York. Someone literally buried a carved block of stone just to dig it up for profit. This proves the 19th century public was dying for giants to be real, and they would absolutely pay money for it. Fast forward to 1890, we have Elias Renner interviewing the giant in prison. Then, conveniently, in the early 1900s, the High Plains Penitentiary burns to the ground, taking all the hard records with it. The entire documentary trail just vanishes.
We also have to look at undeniable medical realities, specifically pituitary gigantism. This is a very real medical disorder of a small gland at the base of the brain that essentially drives the body to grow without ordinary limits. It causes extraordinary height, long spare builds, heavily lined facial features, and shortened lifespans. Honestly, this simple medical condition perfectly explains a man sitting in an 1890 prison cell. A poor, friendless, ill giant requires absolutely no lost civilization to explain his existence. Ordinary medicine explains him entirely.
So how do stories like this evolve over time? Let's track the steps. Number 1, a genuinely sick, unusually tall man really is jailed, and he gets interviewed by a local reporter. Number 2, a skeptical editor looks at this thin, rambling, totally unconfirmable story and spikes it. But then, number 3 happens. Decades of retelling polish those ramblings into a sprawling conspiracy of hidden industrial masters. After 100 years, the tale carries the shiny surface of a hard truth, when really, it might just be a story lovingly grown through oral tradition.
If it's a hoax and the records are burned, why does the story still survive and resonate today? That's the real question, right? This total lack of physical evidence, the lost notebook, the burned prison, the vanished bones, it forces us to ask something much deeper. If this is all just a tall tale manufactured by a newspaper culture that loved selling marvels, why does it still hit so hard for us today?
Well, let's look at why the myth endures. Sure, a skeptic can easily write off the giant as just a sick man, but that same skeptic still has to walk past the exact same vast, inexplicably grand old buildings in our cities. These stories stick around because they give human shape to that vague sense of modern alienation we all feel. It represents our collective grief over lost craftsmanship. We live among the inherited buildings of a world that was richer in craft and slower in its making than our own. It acknowledges our forgotten architectural inheritance and yearns for a world that simply isn't so disposable.
The story of the giant in the cell takes that quiet and formless feeling and gives it a face and a voice, a warmth without coal and a date and a rope. That quote really just hits the nail on the head. Ultimately, the face of the giant is almost certainly invented, but the feeling underneath it, that is incredibly real. Whether Elias Renner's notebook ever truly existed or not, the feeling of having inherited a world we no longer fully understand is powerful. So, what does this longing for a lost, beautiful world tell us about the disposable, scarcity-driven one we've chosen to build today? That is definitely a question worth answering. Thanks for watching this explainer, and I'll leave you to think on that.